They say your wedding day should be the happiest day of your life. But for me, it became the day everything I ever knew shattered into pieces. I stood there at the altar, in front of friends and family, holding the trembling hands of the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. And then, like something out of a nightmare, my sister, me only sibling, my maid of honor, stepped forward and said 7 words that would destroy everything. "Before you say I do, I have to speak." At first, people thought she was making a toast. My mother even smiled proudly. But I could see something else in her eyes, something cold, pained, determined. My sister, Amelia, was not here to celebrate. She was here to burn the whole thing down. Let me take you back to how it all began. Maybe then you'll understand how we ended up in ruins. Growing up, my sister and I were close. 2 years apart, but always side by side. When our parents fought yelling through walls, slamming doors, sometimes disappearing for days, it was Amelia who held me at night, whispering made-up stories until I fell asleep. We were each other's safety. So when she looked me in the eye on my wedding day with tears and fury brewing behind them, I knew this wasn't some petty jealousy. It was real, and it was going to hurt. I met Claire during my final year of med school. She was working at a local bookstore, the kind of place where the scent of old pages clings to your soul. She had that vintage bewtered lips, green eyes, the kind of charm that doesn't fade with time. We fell hard and fast. Within a year, I had proposed in the same bookstore where we first met. Everything seemed perfect. My parents were thrilled. My mom adored Claire. My dad said she was the kind of woman who strengthens a man's legacy. Amelia smiled and nodded. But I noticed the stiffness in her hugs and how she avoided Claire's gaze. I chalked it up to overprotectiveness. I was her little brother, after all. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of tastings, fittings, and family drama, nothing too unusual. But Amelia had started acting distant. She skipped some of the final planning meetings. She canceled lunch dates. She'd answer my texts with one-word replies. I confronted her once, asking if something was wrong. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I just want you to be happy. But happiness built on lies never lasts." I should have pressed her. I didn't. Fast forward to the big day. Everything was picture perfect. The venue, a restored chapel with stained glass windows and golden sunlight streaming in, looked like a dream. Claire was radiant in her gown. The guests were all smiles. My heart was pounding, not just with nerves but with joy. I was marrying the love of my life, or so I thought. The ceremony had just begun. The priest asked if anyone had any objections, and silence filled the room. But before he could move on, Amelia stepped forward. "I need to speak," she said again. Her voice echoed. Claire squeezed my hand tighter. I could feel her nails dig into my palm. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. "Please," Amelia continued. "You all deserve to know the truth, especially you, Adam. That was my name." And in that moment, I stopped breathing. The priest looked at me, then at Claire, unsure of what to do. My mom stood up, whispering, "Amelia, please don't." But Amelia didn't stop. She turned to the crowd, to our family, and finally back to me. "I'm sorry, Adam. I've held this in for too long. But the woman you're about to marry, she's been having an affair. And not just with anyone. With Dad." A collective gasp filled the chapel. I laughed, because what else could I do? I thought it was a sick joke. But then I turned to Claire, and saw her eyes widen not in denial, but in horror. She didn't say a word. That silence screamed the truth. Everything blurred after that. I don't remember the rest of what Amelia said. I only remember my legs giving out, the taste of bile rising in my throat, and Claire not denying it, not even trying. My father stood frozen, his face pale as ash. My mother's hand covered her mouth, trembling. The guests didn't know whether to stay seated or run out screaming. And me? I was just gone. I stumbled out of the chapel, tuxedo heavy like chains, my vision swimming. My wedding day had become a funeral, and the corpse was the version of my life I thought I knew. I don't remember how I got to the parking lot. One moment I was staring into the ruins of a chapel filled with gasps and betrayal, and the next I was out in the cold, dry air, hunched over by a fountain, my chest heaving like it was trying to escape my own body. Somewhere behind me, people were starting to exit the building, some whispering, some crying, some pretending they had seen nothing at all. My hands were shaking. My mind was spinning. Claire hadn't denied it. My father hadn't denied it. What kind of nightmare had I just been pulled into? I sat there for what felt like forever, staring at the wedding band I was supposed to wear. I never put it on. I never would. And then Amelia came outside. She didn't say a word. She just sat beside me, silent. I couldn't even look at her. "You should have told me sooner," I said, voice hoarse. She nodded, slowly. "I wanted to. I tried. But you were in love. And I thought, maybe it wasn't true. Until last week, I turned to her, finally. Eyes filled with everything: rage, confusion, heartbreak. "How did you find out?" She reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. "I didn't want to show you this, but I can't let you marry her." She opened a photo, then another, and another. Messages, screenshots, dates, Claire and my father, hotel rooms, texts that read, "Can't wait to feel you again," and "Don't worry, he'll never know." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You've had this all along?" I whispered. She looked down. "I got suspicious when I saw them whispering at the engagement dinner. Then I followed her one night when she said she was going to a bridal spa. She never showed up there, but he did." The bile in my stomach twisted again. My father, the man who taught me how to shave, the man who stood beside me at my graduation and called me his pride. How long had he been sleeping with the woman I was going to marry? I stormed back into the building. Claire was gone. My mother was sitting alone in the front row, her hands in her lap, trembling. I approached her, and she looked up at me with eyes swollen and red. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice low, trembling. She hesitated, just long enough for the world to fall apart again. "Not at first," she said, "but I suspected. The way she looked at him, the late calls. I confronted him once. He denied it. I wanted to believe him. I turned away from her. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't look at her or him or anyone. My father was standing in a corner, alone. His suit still perfect, but his soul visibly crumbling. When he saw me coming, he straightened. "Adam," he began. "Don't." My voice cracked. "Don't you dare say my name like you care." "How long?" he exhaled. "It wasn't. It just happened. One time." "Don't lie to me," I shouted, and the few remaining guests turned to look. "I've seen the photos, the texts, the hotel receipts. You were with her. Again and again." "I made a mistake," he said. "A mistake?" I snapped. "You destroyed your family. You humiliated your son on his wedding day." I didn't wait for another word. I walked away, past the guests, past the memories, past everything. I needed air. I needed space. I needed a world where this wasn't real. I drove aimlessly that night. Hours, maybe more. I don't remember the roads. I only remember ending up at the lake house, my grandfather's old cabin. It was abandoned now, full of dust and silence. I sat on the porch and screamed, loud, long, until my voice was raw and my soul felt like it was peeling off my skin. I stayed there for 2 days. No calls, no messages, just me and the sound of waves hitting old wood. On the 3rd day, Amelia arrived. She brought soup and a box. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She sat beside me. Evidence, and the rest of the truth. Inside the box were letters, dozens, some written by Claire, others by Dad. But that wasn't what made my hands shake. There were also letters from someone else, someone I hadn't seen in 20 years. My Uncle Robert, my father's brother, the one who mysteriously left the family after a disagreement. Amelia looked me in the eye. "Turns out, this isn't the first time Dad's done this. He slept with Robert's wife, too. That's why he disappeared." My jaw dropped. "So this is a pattern?" Amelia nodded grimly. He's been breaking families for decades, and we've all been pretending it was just bad luck. I leaned back, closing my eyes. Everything made sense now. All the awkward silences, the fractured relationships, the broken holidays. Why didn't you tell me before the wedding? I asked. She exhaled. Because I needed proof, and I needed you to believe it. I couldn't let you walk into a lie again. Like Mom did. Like Uncle Robert did. I buried my face in my hands. He's a monster. She put a hand on my back. He's a coward. But you're not him. You don't have to be. That night I cried harder than I ever had. Not just for the love I lost, but for the father I never really had to begin with. By the time I returned home, 3 more days had passed. The house still had ribbons and decorations left over from what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The dining room table was cluttered with unopened gifts, each one a reminder of a future that would never exist. I didn't touch them. I didn't even take off my shoes. I walked straight to my father's study, where I knew he'd be hiding. Sure enough, the door was cracked open, the smell of his old cigar brand lingering in the air. He was sitting at his desk, glass in hand, swirling brown liquor like it held the answers to every mistake he'd made. "I thought you'd come back angry," he said without turning. "I didn't come back angry," I replied. "I came back ready." He looked at me then, eyes tired, face drawn. "Ready for what?" "For the truth," I said. "All of it. No more half-confessions. No more pathetic excuses. Just tell me why." He set the glass down slowly. "Because I could," he whispered. "Because somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that I deserved more. That your mother didn't understand me. That the rules didn't apply. And once you break one vow, the rest become easier to ignore." "So it wasn't love?" I asked. "With Claire?" He shook his head. "Lust. Ego. Control. She reminded me of my youth, and I hated how much you loved her. It made me feel invisible." I laughed bitterly. "So you stole her? From your own son? Because you couldn't handle being irrelevant?" He said nothing. The silence was his guilt made real. I walked to the bookshelf and pulled out the fake panel Amelia had shown me. Inside were more letters, more proof of the affairs, the lies, even old photos of him with other women over the years. "You've been lying to all of us since before I was even born," I said. "And Mom? She just let it happen?" "She looked the other way," he admitted. "Because confronting it would have meant admitting her whole life was a lie too." "Cowards," I muttered. "All of you." "Not Amelia," he said. "She's always been brave. Just like your grandfather." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" He sighed. "There's something you don't know. Something about your mother's side. Your grandfather, he knew what I was. He tried to stop the wedding." "What wedding?" I asked. "Yours?" "No," he said quietly. "Ours. Mine and your mother's. He told her not to marry me. That I was dangerous. That would ruin everything I touched. He was right." I felt the rage boiling again. "Then why didn't she leave?" "Because she was already pregnant," he said. "With Amelia." I stepped back, stunned. "Wait, Amelia doesn't know?" "No," he replied. "And neither do you, because the truth is you're not my biological son." Silence. It felt like the room stopped breathing. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign he was lying. But the look in his eye stared, broken, almost relieved, told me he was finally telling the truth. "What are you talking about?" I asked, voice cracking. "Your mother had an affair too," he said. "Around the time we were fighting constantly, she reconnected with an old college flame. You're his son. I found out when you were a toddler. I had a paternity test done after you got sick and needed a rare blood test. I never told anyone. I raised you as mine. I convinced myself I could live with it, but part of me always resented you for not being mine, for being hers, for being his." I dropped into the nearest chair, dizzy. "You mean to tell me that all this time? I wasn't even your son?" "Not by blood," he said. "But you were still my son. Until the day I ruined that too." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, to punch a wall, to erase every memory I had with this man. But instead, I laughed. The kind of hollow, bitter laugh that doesn't come from amusement but from madness. "So, let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You slept with my fiancé. You slept with your brother's wife. You've destroyed every relationship you've ever had. And now, in one final twist, I find out that I'm not even your son?" He nodded. "That about sums it up." "And what about Claire?" I asked. "Where is she now?" He hesitated. "She called me once, the night after the wedding. Said she was sorry. That it was never supposed to go this far. That she did love you, but that I made her feel powerful, seen." "You mean you manipulated her?" I spat. "Like you did everyone else." "Maybe," he said. "But she let herself be manipulated. Don't forget that." I stood up. "I'm done here. You're not my father. You're just the man who pretended to be." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." "No," I said. "You deserve worse. But I'm not going to be like you. I'm going to walk out of here with my head up. Because I have one thing you'll never have again: integrity." He didn't argue. He just poured another drink, like a man waiting for his own sentence to be carried out. And I left. For the last time. That night, I drove to Amelia's apartment. When she opened the door and saw my face, she knew something else had happened. I told her everything. About the letters, the affairs, the blood test. The truth about my birth. At first, she didn't believe it. Then she cried. "I thought I had lost a brother," she whispered. "But now I know. I've gained the only real family I've ever had." We sat together on her balcony until the sun rose. Two siblings, no longer tied by blood but by something even stronger: the shared destruction of everything we once believed was real. In the weeks that followed, the wedding that never happened became a kind of legend in our town, neighbors whispered. Friends reached out with awkward texts. Distant relatives posted vague, overly dramatic Facebook statuses. But none of it mattered to me anymore. I had buried the version of myself that stood at that altar. The naive groom. The proud son. The believer in fairy tales. He was gone. What remained was someone clearer, sharper, and ready to start again. I moved out of the house I once shared with Claire. I didn't take much, just my books, my clothes, and a few photos from before things got twisted. I left the engagement ring behind. I wanted her to see it one last time. Not as a gift, but as a reminder of the life she helped destroy. Amelia and I grew closer than ever. We started having dinner together every Sunday. It became our new tradition or version of family, rebuilt from ash. Sometimes we talked about Mom. She had moved in with a friend and stopped answering most calls. I think she was ashamed, but also relieved. She didn't have to pretend anymore. As for Dad, we didn't hear from him again. Not until the letter came. It was handwritten. No return address. Just a plain envelope, sitting in my mailbox like it had every right to be there. Inside was a simple note. "I'm leaving the country. Don't look for me. Don't forgive me. Just remember that once I loved you in the only way I knew how. R." There was no apology. Just a strange sense of closure. "And Claire?" She sent one message. One short, broken thing that arrived late one night. "I'll regret that day for the rest of my life. I hope someday you find someone who deserves the way you love." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Months passed. I focused on my work. I traveled. I spent time alone. And slowly, something strange began to happen. I started to feel free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't performing for love, or validation, or approval. I was just living, and it was enough. One evening, Amelia and I stood on the old bridge near the lake house. We watched the sun set, orange and gold pouring across the water. "You know," she said quietly, "we'll probably never be a normal family again." I smiled. Good. Normal was never real anyway. She laughed. "A real one. The kind that comes from somewhere healed." "So what now?" she asked. "Now?" I said. "Now we write our own story. One with boundaries, with honesty, with people who earn their place in it." She nodded. Then let's start tonight. We stood there a little longer, letting the breeze carry away the ghosts. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt peace. Because sometimes the truth doesn't set you free right away. Sometimes it breaks you first. But once you've rebuilt yourself from the wreckage, once you've faced the ugliest parts of the people you trusted most, and chosen not to let that darkness define you then, and only then, you're free. That was the day I stopped being someone's son, someone's almost husband, someone's secret, and I became someone new, someone who knew the price of silence, the cost of truth, and the power of letting go.